Good afternoon, and welcome to yet another extremely topical and extremely timely AMET webinar. Everyone can agree that the Middle East seems to have been definitely upended from what it was a few short years ago, and many would say it's an infinitely more dangerous place. Just this week, we awoke to the sobering news that the United States has been meeting in Oman in an attempt to revise nuclear talks with the Iranians. One of the conditions offered was that the Iranians are allowed to continue enriching uranium at the present level. The buzzwords have been reported as being a freeze for a freeze. What exactly this means, we're not sure. Does that freezing mean at the level of 60% highly enriched uranium, which is a new and very dangerous threshold? We have to be aware that the JCPOA had specified that the Iranians were not allowed to enrich to a level greater than 3.67%. And yesterday, Iran claimed that it had reached an agreement with the IAEA to have closed 2 probes into Iranian nuclear sites, where they have found traces of uranium at the 83.7% level, which is just a hair's breadth away from the 90% lethal level necessary for a nuclear weapon. As IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi had said, quote, Iran is galloping towards a nuclear weapon. Unfortunately, ever since March 10th, when Beijing first brokered its agreement between Tehran and Riyadh, we're seeing a very different Middle East. Old rivalries seem to be coming together. Just days after this agreement, Iran's top security official, Ali Shabkhani, traveled to the United Arab Emirates to reach closer economic, security, and diplomatic ties. This is the UAE, one of the first members of the Abraham Accords. On this past Monday, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, fresh from his electoral victory, agreed on, quote, the immediate start of upgrading diplomatic relations and exchanging ambassadors, unquote. In April, the foreign minister of Jordan, who signed a peace treaty with Israel back in 1994, and Iran agreed to meet and stated that, quote, they will continue meeting in order to reach understandings based on future relations to establish cooperation and to contribute to strengthening security. And after 12 years, the butcher of Damascus, Bashir al-Assad, who slaughtered approximately 500,000 of his own people and displaced approximately 5 million of them, has been readmitted into the Arab League. Meanwhile, this past Ramadan, Palestinian Islamic Jihad launched approximately 1,200 missiles into Israel. We're all worried that the Iranian proxies of Hamas, Hezbollah, and other terrorist groups can emerge in a united front and attack Israel on multiple fronts at once. This is a new and frightening world order, and Israel might well feel left out on its own once again in the Middle East. Here to discuss this is a wonderful friend of Amet's and a wonderful Israeli patriot, Brigadier General Amir Avivi. Brigadier General Avivi is the director of Habishtonim and is the founder and CEO of Habishtonim, Israel's Defense and Security Forum. Habishtonim is comprised of more than 17,000 senior reserve retired officers, commanders, and operators from all branches of the Israeli security establishment. Retired from the IDF after more than 30 years of military, counterterrorism, national security experience, Brigadier General Avivi has held various command positions in the Corps of Engineers, leading thousands of soldiers in a dynamic environment combating terrorism. He has also just completed a wonderful book, and we can't wait for this to come out. and to host him on a book tour. We should also say that Brigadier General Avivi has been at the heart of the policy-making process in the Israeli government for years and years, and of the defense establishment during his times. Avivi also serves as a principal of the New State Solution Working Group. First, Amir, welcome once again to Amit. It is always a profound pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure.
And my first question to you is, just in case people don't understand what the IDSF is and what it does and why it's so important, if you just wanted to give a little bit of an overview of this.
So IDSF, Israel's Defense and Security Forum, was founded in order to promote Israel's national security, looking in the very long term for generations to come. And we understand that national security is first and foremost about national values. It's about a connection to Judaism, to Zionism, to our land. It's about spirit, because we know that without spirit, there is no tank and no airplane that can help. The most important thing for Israel and for the Jewish people overall, in order to thrive and succeed and be secure and meet all the challenges that we have, and we have so many all around the world, is first and foremost to be connected to our values with a strong sense of rightness, with a strong will. Everything is about will. Will is it's the strongest power there is. In Hebrew, you say there is nothing that can stand in front of will. But what fuels will is believing in yourself, being the hero of your own story. And we, with the Jewish people, are the biggest story of all. And we have to remember a simple truth. We are the heroes of our own story, not the villains. People sometimes forget that. And in IDSF, we understand that really in order to shape the way the young generation, the society, decision makers relate to the values and also understand the challenges and what needs to be done, you need to be very, very proactive. So we are a grassroots movement and also a think tank, and we mobilize thousands of officers to educate the young generation. Today, we are active in all the pre-army programs in Israel. This year, we started reaching out to the high schools. We put a modest goal. We said we'll go into 30 high schools in Israel this year. Now, by the middle of the year, we already covered 50. And we're working with the Ministry of Education and with the Education Corps of the Army. And because Zionism, it's amazing what I'm going to say now, Zionism is lacking from the education of the young Israelis, which is crazy. We are bridging this gap, bringing the best officers Israel have to the high schools and get the young generation connected again to their core values. And this, of course, immediately affects also their motivation to do meaningful military service. This is part of what we're doing. And because we are a big organization, we're able to meet any demand. This is why we're getting more and more high schools to educate. And now we are starting to get requests also from Jewish communities to come and also talk to the young generation and educate the young generation in the Jewish world. And we're working with Minister Amichai Shikli to build programs also for the diaspora. So we're doing a lot talking about education, but shaping hearts and minds. It's also about being very active on media and social media. Today, we basically dominate completely mainstream media in Israel. We operate all social media platforms in Hebrew and in English. and we are very active in social media. And we have a research department, and we produce very high quality papers, which we use when we meet with the Prime Minister, with ministers, with the Knesset members, but also with diplomats. You know, Sarah, we come quite often also to Washington and meet with congressmen and senators and officials, and also in Europe. So this is what we do. We educate the young generation, we educate the general public through media and social media, and we work with the governments, the policymakers, and all of that, one goal, securing Israel and the Jewish people for generations to come.
Right. So you've been traveling around the world and have spent a lot of time in America. What do you believe the state of Zionism is like among young American Jews?
I think we are in a big crisis, and I think that the problem is that that's probably the biggest challenge we are facing in Israel and in the Jewish world. And you know, Sarah, you did your opening, a very long opening about Iran, and we'll talk about Iran. But the number one challenge we are facing as a Jewish nation is our values. As I said before, you know, in every great story, there is a hero and there is a villain. And since the 60s, and this is something that started with the Soviet Union, they built the whole propaganda that was intended to vilify Zionism. They worked very closely with the Palestinians. It's not by chance that Abbas did his PhD, you know, with the USSR, you know, Secret Service. And they built a concept that was embedded also in large parts of the Western world, that basically the idea was to portray Zionism as Nazism. Think about it, it's crazy. Like, we're the victims, right? 6 million Jews were killed, but they managed to build an idea that basically vilifies Zionism and takes us from being the heroes of our own story to become villains in our own story. And unfortunately, many Jews are buying that, you know, in forms of talking about occupation and the Palestinians and all of that. And today it takes a form of BDS. And basically, you know, it's not a talk about two states or something like that. It's Palestine will be free from the river to the sea. There is no Jews in this scenario. We are all in the sea. And when somebody puts a narrative which is completely false, but says, you guys, you don't belong here at all. You are Europeans, conquerors that came and conquered some invented state called Palestine. And it's not your place. And if the Jews are not really understanding who they are and what Judaism and Zionism is all about, then it becomes a serious problem. And one of the things that they understand is, on one hand, there is unbelievable gap of knowledge. I mean, today, when you talk to the young generation, you ask the most basic questions, they don't know anything. It's unbelievable. But also, there is a problem that people don't understand, that they need to know how to detach their basic values from practical issues. For example, you mentioned that I am, among other things, I deal with the new state solution, which is one solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I actually deal with 4 different solutions. But I am 100% Jew, 100% Zionist. I love every centimeter, every inch of the land of Israel. I love my people. I love my heritage and my history. And still, on the practical level, I can deal with, you know, solutions, you know, look at a problem and deal with it. And Jews are mixing their values with solutions. Like if somebody thinks that maybe you have to give up the parts of Judea and Samaria, all of it. So they hate Judea and Samaria, they hate the settlers, they hate their heritage, they disregard their history. Why? Because they want to solve a problem. That's not the way to go about it. And when we behave like that, it emboldens our enemies even more. They say these guys, they don't believe in their own, history and rightness. And no, the answer is simple. We're the people of Israel, and this is the land of Israel, and it's ours, period. Now, let's look at reality and deal with it. When I stand in a synagogue, a community, and I say a simple sentence like, you don't need to give up your identity to solve problems. It's simple, but people like a shock when I say that. Like it's, a revelation. We can keep our identity. And we really need to understand that Zionism is a whole concept. The moment you put one hole in it, it's like a dam that you put one hole and you have water going out in one place, but then it starts going from another one and another one and another one. And eventually the dam collapses. And then you have post-Zionism. Right. And this is what's happening to us.
Right.
People are putting holes in this whole idea. You cannot put a hole in Zionism. It's a whole idea. You can discuss solutions. I always remind that when the Romans occupied our land, there were two giant, figures 100 years apart, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Rabbi Akiva. Now, both of them were dealing with the same problem, Roman occupation. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai looked at it and said, look, they're too powerful. We have to find terms with them. We have to negotiate. We have to leave Jerusalem. We have to build Bible studies in Yavne. And this is how he dealt with it. And Rabbi Akiva said, no, we have to rebel and we have to fight them all the way. And he started the rebellion of Bar Kokhba. But nobody can claim about these two people that they were not 100% Zionists. Of course they were. They knew exactly who we are. They knew exactly who this land belongs to. But on the practical level, they had different solutions. It's okay to have different solutions, but you cannot hate yourself in order to find a solution. And also, there is a need to really connect to reality. People tend to also disregard reality when they talk about this issue. They put too much emotion, and I think that there is a need for a bit of emotional detachment when you come to these issues, and be a bit realistic and look at the issues the ways they are.
Right. As Ambassador Yoram Ettinger says, wishful thinking is not a policy statement, and hope is not a policy statement.
So I'll tell you how we go about with the young generation in Israel. People always invite me, they want to hear solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a lot of solutions in our website. If you go into idff.org.il, we have a whole papers talking about solutions. But I tell them, I can present solutions and I will, but there is no point talking about solutions. I'm not sure we agree on the problem. What problem are we trying to solve? And I think there is a big discussion on what is the problem. We're not defining it. And so people talk about solutions without even having a discussion about the problem. And then, before we even talk about the problem, the question is, what's the right question? The right question should be, what is needed to secure Israel and the Jewish people for generations to come? We are after twice we were exiled from our own land. 2,000 years in the diaspora, persecutions, pogroms, Holocaust. We cannot afford another exile. We cannot afford it. We need to make sure that we are secure and prosperous for generations to come. What is needed? Does anybody here know what are the parameters needed for Israel to be secure for generations to come? If you don't know that, there is no point even starting talking about the Palestinians or the problems with the Palestinians. We need to talk about us.
Right.
And in order to talk about us, and that's where we start, is knowing who we are,
Right.
is understanding our values. So we do reverse engineering. We say, guys, we're not going to start with the problem. Let's talk about us. Then let's talk about what we need to be to exist. Then let's define rightly the problem, and then maybe we can talk about solution.
Right. Very true. If you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going to. Yeah. So Amir, but in terms of existential physical threats to Israel, we know that Israel is facing a profound threat with the development of the Iranian nuclear bomb. And we at Met do a lot more than our weekly webinars. We're on Capitol Hill every day and meeting with members of Congress. And often, or their staffers, and often we're asked, what is it that Israel really wants from the United States? Could you help us come to a solution here?
Again, solution for?
What Israel really wants and needs from the United States.
Okay, I would like to start, Sarah, by saying something before. Look, people lately, are becoming really worried, and what's going to happen, and maybe there will be a big war and a multi-front war. What are we going to do? And all this political turmoil in Israel. So, the issue of the veterans in the army. And I want to make it crystal clear to everybody. Israel is strong. Israel is very, very strong. And we are able to win, and we are able to overcome all the challenges around us. And I think that the good news is that we understand what is in front of us. We understand the challenges. We know what the Iranian threat is. We understand what is surrounding us with all these proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and all this terrorism in the Judea and Samaria and the West Bank and so on. And Israel is preparing for these challenges. Maybe we'll meet them. It will be hard. But we'll overcome it. We are strong and able to deal with the challenges. Now, I want to explain what we need from the US. And I had an interesting discussion with Ron Dermer, and told me something that I really relate to. He said that one of the officials in the US was lamenting, was saying to him, Ron, you Israelis, you talk to the Russians, you talk to the Chinese, and we Americans, we don't like that. And he said to him, it's like boy dating a girl, and she's dating also other boys. And he's not happy about that. But all he needs to do is put the rings, that's it. So what the US needs to do is put the ring on Israel's finger. And putting the ring on Israel's finger means showing leadership, stabilizing the Middle East by building a coalition with Israel and the Sunni moderate states, including Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, and Bahrain and Oman, promoting peace agreements, because Saudi Arabia is more than willing to do peace with Israel, and even expand this peace also to Pakistan and Indonesia and Oman. But they are not going to go forward with a peace agreement if the US doesn't commit to be a leader and a player in the Middle East and pose a credible military threat on Iran. Now, this needs to be done not because of Israeli interests and not because of Saudi interests, because of American interests, because America is losing the Middle East to China and Russia. The fact that America is not present, it's destabilizing one of the most dangerous and delicate places in the globe. the Middle East. And by not being present, we find ourselves in a reality where Iran is becoming more important. They have Russian backup because the Russians have become in the last year very dependent on Iranian capabilities. Russia is less present in Syria because they are focused on Ukraine, so Iran has much more room to maneuver. And the relations have tightened. And so the prospect of a regional war without US presence is growing all the time. And this is very, very dangerous because if there will be a war in the Middle East, this will bring world recession. This will make oil prices go crazy. This will destabilize what is already destabilized, which is all the routes of trade. Already we see a crisis which President Biden talked about when he visited Israel, talking about the movement of goods from east and to west and so on, the supply chain. And it's going to get worse. So it's in the best interest of the West and of the US to stabilize the region and be present here.
Right. Okay. So, as you know, Mahmoud Abbas is in his 18th year of a 4-year term, and he's in ill health. And according to the latest polls out of Khalil Shakaki's polling center, 85% of people on the West Bank say that they would not listen to Mahmoud Abbas and certainly would not reelect him. What is going to happen with the Palestinian population after he dies? Where is this all heading?
So the day after Abbas is a big issue. We have done a lot of research about that. It's interesting that this is a very crucial issue and there is almost no research about it. The Palestinian Arabs hate this entity, the Palestinian Authority, and are fed up with it, and they want it gone. And it's already kind of falling apart. You have different fractions of the Fatah basically detaching from the Palestinian Authority. You have the population much more supportive of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad or other fractions. You have a whole group of potential successors in the Fatah, each one of them building its own militia, ready to fight the others for succession. And you also have growing strengths of the local leadership, the heads of the tribes, the Hamulas, in the different cities. They are the real leaders, really, that have been there long before the Fatah came from Tunis. And they want to go back to lead their cities and control what's going on. So there is a fairly good chance that the day after Abu Mazen, there will be some kind of civil war. There will be, fight between different factions, and it's very, very difficult to project what exactly will happen. We need to build on different scenarios and talk about that. The Israeli defense establishment, unfortunately, in this case, I think is stuck with the notion that the only good solution is the Palestinian Authority, and it's simply not true. Of course, Hamas is not a good option, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad is not a good option, but actually the local leadership is a good option. And whether we like it or not, whether the government or the defense establishment are supportive of this or not, this is a reality they might meet if, for example, in Hebron or Jericho, the Palestinian Authority is not present anymore, and the local leaders take leadership and say, that's it, we control the city. What will we do? If it's Hamas, we'll go in and we'll apprehend them and we won't let them control. But are we going to fight the local leadership of the cities. We're not going to do that. And it's enough that one city, detaches from the Palestinian Authority, and that's it, it's over. Already half of them are not under the control of the Palestinian Authority. Half of the Palestinians are under Hamas control, and they will never, ever connect back with the Palestinian Authority. There is no one Palestinian group. They're already split. And inside Judah and Samaria, they're completely split. So it's going to be very, very interesting what's going to happen the day after Abu Mazen.
But you think with the internet and all of its popularity, the next generation of the Hamullahs will be as stable as they had been in the past?
Hard to say. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I can tell you something from experience, okay, not theory.
Mm-hmm.
I remember 2 years ago when the issue of sovereignty was still, President Trump was still in office, and there was talk about applying sovereignty in the Jordan Valley and in the Jewish towns. We met 6 generals with the Prime Minister Netanyahu, and at a certain stage he asked us, what will happen if I apply sovereignty and the Palestinian Authority will collapse? We didn't prepare for this question, but it was interesting that we all answered the same, 6 generals.
Mm-hmm.
General Jerry Gershon, he commanded Operation Defensive Shield in 2002. He said, listen, Mr. Prime Minister, it's not a theoretical question, it already happened. Because in Operation Defensive Shield, the Palestinian Authority completely collapsed. And for 1.5 years, we worked with the local leaderships in the cities, with the municipalities. The municipalities are run by the local leadership. By the way, the municipalities in the Israeli Arab cities are run exactly the same by the local Hamullahs. This is the way the Arab society is built. It's not different between Israeli Arabs or Palestinian Arabs. It was working for 1.5 years. The fact that the Israeli government decided to bring back the Palestinian Authority, that was the decision. But we did manage to work very well with the local leadership for a long time.
Okay, and I know you spoke a lot about Israel's capabilities if there is a war on many fronts, but there's no getting around the fact that Hezbollah has 150,000 missiles aimed at Israel, and that some of them have been converted into precision-guided munitions that can target really essential, critical places of Israel's infrastructure. So how, in general, without revealing any secrets, is Israel preparing for this scenario?
So Lebanon is very different from Gaza. In Gaza, we can have the luxury, I would say, not to maneuver inside Gaza and rely on Iron Dome and just attack them from the air, or mostly from the air, and prevent severe damages in Israel. It's not the case in Lebanon. In Lebanon, because they have much more capabilities and they can inflict serious damage, even with Iron Dome and other capabilities. Israel is not going to behave the same as in Gaza. If there is a war in Lebanon, the army will maneuver very, very fast. We will conquer large portions of Lebanon. We'll destroy Hezbollah completely in all the places that we are going to conquer. And Hezbollah is no match to the Israeli Defense Forces. And I'm saying that not to brag. This is the reality. We are by far stronger than them. And once the ground forces will maneuver with our air power and the precision capabilities and so on, this will end one way, with us destroying all the Hezbollah everywhere will arrive. And they know that. And they know that this is why they are not, for many, many years, since 2006, Hezbollah hasn't challenged Israel. The army has been preparing for a long time, and I can tell you that in reserve, what I do in reserve is check the readiness of the northern divisions for wars with Hezbollah. So when I say what I say is not only because of my experience 30 years in the army or what I do in IDFF, but also by the fact that I have checked the readiness myself of the divisions that have to operate in Lebanon. And I can say that definitely we are in a high readiness. The units are motivated, strong, the technologies are really amazing. We have today capabilities that really enable the sphere of the forces to maneuver almost without anybody able to stop them. Not that there is not going to be hard, and not that we won't have casualties, we will. But we built really impressive capabilities, and we're preparing, like this week and next week, we're preparing for this kind of warfare. By the way, just to get a sense of what the IDF can do, not in theory, what the IDF does every night, okay? Every day and every night, we operate inside Jenin, inside Nablus, inside Hebron, in areas that are full of terrorists shooting from all over against our forces. And again and again and again and again, we go in, we apprehend who we want to apprehend, we kill who we want to kill. And the 99.9 times, all our soldiers go back safe and sound. And this is something we do every night. This is our capability. And it happens every night.
Amazing, amazing. Halakavod. All right, and with that, it is my honor to turn the podium over to my wonderful colleague, Joseph Epstein, who will field the questions that have come in and perhaps even ask some of his own. Joseph?
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you so much, Amir. That was very timely and very interesting. And I'd also like to thank all our attendees. There are a lot of really great questions. So without further ado, one question that we've gotten quite a bit after you were speaking about the Hamollahs is, how can the local Palestinian leadership or those Hamollahs be empowered to break away from the PA and make peace with Israel?
So I think that I have met with several Hamullah leaders, and what they say to us is that the fact that for a long time, the government and the defense establishment are supportive of the Palestinian Authority, and they view the Palestinian Authority as enemies. This discourages them. They say, look, we cannot take an initiative and take control of a city if you guys then will let the Palestinian Authority or even help the Palestinian Authority regain control of the city. We need to know that you back us up, that you defend us, that if we say that we are now controlling a city and we want to have direct relations with Israel, that you back us. And unfortunately, this is not yet the case, not with the defense establishment and not with the government. I can say that in the government, there are several leading figures that already understand that this is a good option. But we need the process. Now, I think that what will bring this about very fast is the collapse of the Palestinian Authority. If it collapses and this becomes the one viable option, because today we have been told for 30 years, we have two options, or Palestinian Authority or Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So everybody says, okay, we know the Palestinian Authority is terrible. But what is the other option? Hamas. But once people realize that actually there is a third option, and that we have no other chance because the Palestinian Authority collapsed, then it will be relevant.
Thank you. Another question that we've got quite a bit is about the status of the peace talks with Saudi Arabia. So do you see the status having changed, especially after the détente between Saudi Arabia and Iran that was set up by Beijing?
I think that strategically, the Saudis are still, they know that the Iranians are a huge threat for them. They don't trust the Iranians. They rather have a coalition with Israel and have peace with Israel. But they need American commitment. And they are signaling to the US that if the US are not present, if they're not backing them up, they might, at a certain stage, change alliance and go with the Chinese and go with the Russians, or at least keep options open, even with Israelis. With all our amazing relations with the US, the ring is not on our finger. We keep always the options open. We keep good relations with the Russians. We keep good relations with China. If we had full commitment, it wouldn't be like that. It would be different. For example, Israel would assist dramatically militarily Ukraine. We don't do that now. We don't want to upset the Russians. But if America steps forward and says we are going to fight with you against Iran, or at least pose a credible military threat on Iran, Israel will change completely its policy regarding Ukraine and will assist the Ukrainians. And we are able to shift this whole war around with our capabilities. So I think that the Saudis are keeping options open because they feel they cannot completely trust the US.
Thank you. That actually brings me to my next question, which is, as the US seems to be less reliable in the region, is Israel trying to solidify other strategic, maybe regional partnerships? And do you believe that it has done a good job in this respect, if it has?
Israel is working very hard to solidify relations with countries that share the same interests we have, like Azerbaijan, for example. But it's much harder to do it when you don't have the US present and leading this. So we are working, we are doing this, but it has good results, but still the lack of commitment from the US is affecting the whole region.
You mentioned Azerbaijan, which is a great example of a strategic relationship that Israel has established, especially on Iran's borders. And I wanted to ask, are there any other potentials for close relationships with countries on Iran's borders? I know recently Israel opened up its embassy in Turkmenistan, although it seems like the government there might not be as reliable or as stable as the Azeri one.
You know, Azerbaijan is interesting because 25% of the Iranian population is Azeri. And Azeris is a strong force in Iran. Overall in Iran, only 50% of the Iranians are Persians. So you have Kurds, which have good relations with Israel. You have Arabs, and some of them are in relation with Israel inside Iran. And you have the Azeris, that when you are in a good relations with Azerbaijan, it affects the Azeri population inside Iran. And you also have Persians that are supportive of Israel. Israel has also some kind of initial relations with Pakistan, also surrounding Iran. So we're building a whole ecosystem, but what will enable to really push this much stronger, this is the American commitment, because once Saudi Arabia says we are doing a peace agreement, this will bring an alliance which will surround Iran from all sides. It will be very meaningful. By the way, one of the big challenges Iran is facing now is from the Taliban. Taliban is getting stronger. Finally, maybe there's going to be good use of all these munitions and capabilities the US left in Afghanistan, because now they are moving it all to the Iranian border and trying to challenge Iran, because this is radical Sunnis, and for them Iran is the worst enemy. So having Afghanistan challenge Iran is actually not bad. And we hope to see them really active on this field, like ISIS was when they were fighting the Iranian militias.
May they both be successful. I'm sorry.
We wish all sides success.
Go ahead, Joseph.
So earlier in the webinar, you mentioned how the Zionist movement, especially in the diaspora, is really in a crisis. What do you believe the future of the Zionist movement is inside the United States, and what role should Israel play when it comes to relations with the diaspora?
First of all, I want to say that Zionism not only not ended, it just started. We're just at the beginning. We have a long, long, long way to go. And maybe for a decade or two, we got a bit confused. But I can say, at least looking at the young generation in Israel, they are not confused, or much less than some of their parents. And there is really a yearning for being connected to their identity and patriotism. It's something that the young generation connects to really, really easily. I think that Israel needs to understand, and this I write in my book, that today, from the 4 biggest challenges and campaigns Israel is facing, the government is dealing with only one: Iran. And they're not dealing seriously with the challenge of what is happening in the diaspora. They're not allocating the funds needed, the attention, the understanding that they are losing millions of Jews. This is critical to deal with. My feeling in my organization, we're not willing to give up any Jew. We want to fight for the Jewish people. We care about all Jews. And we really are pushing the government to change policy and understand that we need to fight. And when we talk about anti-Semitism, BDS and campuses and all of that, I can tell you that I think that the focus is not in the right place. You have organizations and people pouring millions and millions of dollars on this issue in the universities. It's almost a waste of time. We need to focus on ourselves. We need to focus on the Jewish people, because when you don't do that for 18 years, and then you send an 18-year-old Jew to the university, he stands no chance. He comes without the basic things, the basic tools he needs to be able to cope with. It's like taking somebody from civilian to a war in Lebanon without going through basic training, without equipping him, without nothing. Doesn't make sense. So we really need to invest in the young generation, in the communities, and we need to build leadership. And this is what we want to help to do: give the know and build leadership, and understand that it's not only about information, not only about talking to the mind. You have to talk to the heart. Being a Jew was always hard. okay, for centuries. But Jews knew they are the Delta Force of the nations, that they are special. Now, if you are a special unit, it goes without saying that it's hard. It's part of the job. But you are proud, say, listen, guys, I'm in the top unit. But what happens if it's hard and you think you're in a shitty unit? Why bother? Now, what we do in the army, all our service, is build unit pride, is build unit's resilience, because we need to lead soldiers in war. They need to be strong, proud, and resilient. And it's a lot about values and talking to the heart. It's not just about talking to the mind. It's not just about teaching them history. It's much more than that. It's about leadership. And this is what we need to bring to the communities.
You make an excellent point, and I couldn't agree with you more. And so another question that we've gotten multiple times is on the American assurances of not letting Iran achieve a nuclear weapon. How much credence should Israel give to those promises? And does Israel have a red line when it comes to Iranian nuclear proliferation that would cause it to attack?
I think that the message Israel is conveying all the time is we will defend ourselves by ourselves when needed and when needed. And we're not relying on anybody. Now, the US should be involved and lead this not because of Israel, because of US interests. Okay, it's not for us, it's for US. And if we need to defend ourselves by ourselves, we'll do that. But the problem is that if we do it alone, the prospect of a regional war will be very high. If we do it as a coalition, this enhances much more the success and also will stabilize eventually the region. It's a very different scenario. Now, the red line, there is a lot of different things that can become a red line. For example, the Russians equipping the Iranians with certain capability. For example, the underground projects that Iran is doing now, and our assessment, can we hit it or not? For example, do we think that we can bring yet the US on board? Do we have more time or not? It's not only about how much they are enriching uranium. It's part of the decision making. And there are other issues and considerations which I cannot talk about. But I can say, when I became aide-de-camp of the Chief of General Staff, and as aide-de-camp of the Chief of General Staff, you see everything that the Chief of Staff knows, you know. And I remember when I really got to understand what we're able to do, that I thought to myself that really I've never seen a movie that can capture the audacity and creativity of the Israeli Defense Forces and of Israel. What we know how to do is beyond imagination. And the day we'll have to do it, I think the whole world will be astonished by the capabilities of Israeli Defense Forces.
Thank you.
That date might come pretty soon.
Thank you. Just this week, Recep Erdogan was declared the winner of Turkish elections for president. How does his victory affect Israeli-Turkish relations? And do you think even if he is voted out at some point, is there a way that Israel and Turkey could return to the point that they were before Erdogan was elected?
So in this case, you had two terrible candidates that were contesting for presidency. And at least Erdogan we know for many years. And actually, as you know, in the last year or two, he came to an understanding that he needs to improve relations with Israel. We have a lot of common interests with Turkey. We have trade that is all the time growing between the two countries. Erdogan is very interested in our gas capability and would like to have this gas move through Turkey to Europe and not through Italy or Greece. He also understands that if he wants to improve relations with the US, he needs good relations with Israel. So overall, I think for Israel it's good. Although he's a terrible guy, but for Israel, him winning the presidency, compared, by the way, to the other guy, I think it turned out okay. But you know, Turkey, you have to always keep an eye open and see where this is going.
Thank you. Previously, you mentioned the large Azeri minority in Iran, and you also spoke to the Kurdish minority there as well. Is Israel doing anything to empower that Kurdish minority too?
Not enough. I think that more can be done. I cannot really say exactly what Israel is doing, but I would say this. I think that one of the benefits we can have from a coalition that will challenge Iran, this will empower the Iranian people dramatically to bring down the regime. They need to see the West standing with them, and this is not happening. The day they will feel that there is somebody who actually is willing to threaten the regime, this will empower them a lot to be much more active. I think not only Israel, I think the US can do much more in encouraging the Iranian society to fight its own regime.
Thank you. Concretely speaking, when you speak of developing an anti-regime coalition, what needs to be done?
I think it's first and foremost about a clear declaration. You crossed the red line, we're not going to allow this anymore. Formally, do a coalition. I think that Central Command has quite a lot of air power. If they want to show off and bring another big carrier with more planes, okay. But when you take Israeli capabilities, Saudi capabilities, Emirates capabilities, all these countries, and the US says, okay, this is a coalition, and we have American capabilities. And now we're going to challenge the Iranians and demand them to dismantle the program. This will be dramatic. It doesn't necessarily require the US to amass much more forces than they already have, certainly not when they have Israel. Now, this is maybe finally the US will be able to explain the American people why they spend so much money in building these forces like Israel and the Saudis and so on. It's time to utilize them for American benefit. And we have to understand that because there is a need to build global deterrence, the globe is not stabilized. The Chinese are, contemplating invading Taiwan. The Russians are aggressive in Europe. The Iranians in the Middle East. This act can bring deterrence also in the Pacific and in Russia, and this will help America in the sense that they won't need to amass so many forces, because now the US is building huge bases in the Philippines. All the Marines are being brought to this region. They are facing China directly. This is not a smart move. It's better to challenge the Iranians and deter the Chinese and not challenge directly the Chinese.
If this coalition was created, and since I see we're out of time, so this will be the last question. If it was created, do you think Iran would be able to establish a coalition to counter? Do you think China and Russia would be interested in being part of that?
No, I don't think that Russia or China will get involved militarily, and certainly not China. And Russians maybe will, want to maybe assist a bit militarily, but you have to understand Russia is completely occupied in Ukraine, hundreds of thousands of injuries and dead people. They have no ability to do anything in this region. And therefore, the Iranians will be alone. Now, if we challenge the Iranians, this will also affect dramatically the ability of Russia to fight in Ukraine. There is a lot to gain here. So really, I don't understand what the US is waiting for. It's not clear. Peace agreements, deterrence, stability, so much to gain.
Thank you so much, Amir. It is always a pleasure to listen to your intellectual clarity and your moral courage. And you represent, I know, not just yourself, but 17,000 members of the IDFF, wonderful, proud, courageous Zionists and fighters for the state of Israel, which we all depend on so much. Please, if you would like to support IDSF, your website is idsf.org. Is that it?
.org.il.
.il, idsf.org.il. Also, in this world where things seem to be appending radically, our American members of Congress depend on AMET to give them accurate and up-to-date analyses for their critical policy decisions. So if you like what you hear and you want to continue our presence on Capitol Hill, please remember also to support ametonline.org. Again, Amir, it is always a privilege and an honor to have you on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
Okay. Bye.